Picture a dragon. Massive, terrifying, and above all, breathing scorching fire. But what if that dragon, instead of flames, breathed soap bubbles? Hilarious, right? A total joke to everyone around him. But when a catastrophic fire consumes the forest and there's nowhere left to run, that dragon and his ridiculous bubbles become the only hope left. Are you ready to hear how the laughingstock became the savior? High atop the jagged peaks of Mount Cinder, where the air perpetually smelled of sulfur and the ground was hot enough to fry an egg, lived a clan of dragons renowned for their ferocity. Their scales were as hard as obsidian, their wingspans could block out the midday sun, and their breath could incinerate a stone fortress in a blink of an eye. This was the standard. This was the expectation. But for Draco, a young dragon with scales the color of fresh spring grass, this standard was a waking nightmare he faced every single morning. Draco was different. Not because he was weak or small or unable to fly, but because of a peculiar biological quirk that his family found deeply embarrassing and the school. Bullies found endlessly entertaining. Whenever Draco opened his mouth to roar or summon the primal fire from his belly, no smoke came out, no heat, no spark. Instead, a large, perfectly round, shimmering soap bubble would drift lazily out of his jaws. Yes, a bubble. Sometimes it smelled like strawberries, other times like fresh rain. No one knew why, but it was his reality. One scorching afternoon, while the young dragons were training in what they called the Valley of Embers, Draco once again found himself the center of unwanted attention. Ignis, the largest and most arrogant dragon of their generation, was showing off in the center of the ring. He inhaled deeply, his chest expanding like a furnace, and unleashed a jet of pure blue-white flame that turned a target boulder into a pile of grey ash within seconds. The elder dragons watched from the ridges, nodding in approval. "Now that is a true dragon," Ignis's father bellowed, his voice shaking the ground. Ignis smirked, turning his slit-pupilled eyes toward Draco, who was trying to make himself look invisible behind his own wings. "Hey, Draco," Ignis called out, prompting snickers from the group. "Your turn. Maybe you want to wash the floor with your bubbles." "It's a shame to waste a dragon on laundry duty, don't you think?" The valley echoed with raucous laughter. Draco felt the heat rise in his face, not from fire, but from burning shame. He wanted to fight back. He wanted to prove them wrong. He squeezed his eyes shut, focused on the anger in his heart, and tried to summon the heat from his gut. "I can do this," he whispered. "Fire. Just one spark." He opened his eyes and exhaled with everything he had. But tragedy, or perhaps comedy, struck again. No fire emerged. Instead, a colossal, wobbling bubble formed larger than Ignis himself. It floated gently, dancing on the thermal currents, swirling with iridescent colors of pink and teal. It drifted straight toward the clan elder, tapped him on the snout, and burst with a loud, wet pop, drenching the old dragon's face in mint-scented soapy water. Silence reigned for 3 heartbeat-stopping seconds before the valley erupted in laughter louder than before. "Go home, Draco," someone shouted. "The cleaning lady has arrived." Another jeered. Draco couldn't take it anymore. He unfurled his emerald wings and launched himself into the sky, diving away from the mountain down toward the only place where he wasn't judged, a whispering forest. The Whispering Forest was a sanctuary at the base of the mountain. Here, the trees were ancient, the streams ran clear, and the animals lived in relative peace. This was the only place Draco felt like he had a purpose. Whenever he landed in the wide meadows, the deer, the rabbits, and the birds didn't scatter in fear. They knew he didn't breathe fire. In fact, they loved him for it. "Draco," chirped a blue jay, landing bravely on one of his horns. "Make another one, the really big one." Draco smiled, a sad, weary smile. "All right, little one, just for you." He exhaled a stream of small, durable bubbles. The baby rabbits chased them, bouncing through the tall grass, popping them with their wet noses. For a moment, watching the joy he created, Draco forgot he was a failure. Here, he was a friend. He was safe. But in the back of his mind, the longing remained, the wish that just once he could be a real dragon like his father wanted. Weeks passed, and the season turned into a brutal drought. The lush grass at the mountain's base turned brittle and gold. The trees gasped for water, their leaves crinkling like parchment. Up on the mountain, however, the arrogance of the dragons remained unchanged. Ignis and his crew were bored. Watch this, Ignis challenged as they flew high above the dried-out forest canopy. "I bet I can hit that old oak tree from this altitude, don't Ignis?" a companion warned. "The forest is too dry. It's dangerous." But Ignis never listened. He wanted the glory. He spat a fireball downward. It spiraled through the air and struck a dead acacia tree. Instantly, the wood ignited. Ignis assumed the fire would die out, but the wind was treacherous that day. It picked up the embers and scattered them like seeds of destruction. Within minutes, the single burning tree became a row of burning trees. Then a wall of fire. The whispering forest began to scream. The dragons up on the mountain panicked. "Fire! Wildfire!" they roared. They dove down to help, but what could they do? They were creatures of flame. Their breath only added to the inferno. They couldn't blow it out. Their lungs were furnaces. They hovered helplessly, watching the world turn to ash beneath them. Draco was by the river when the smell hit him. It wasn't the clean scent of his bubbles. It was the acrid, choking stench of fear and soot. He looked up and saw the black plume blotting out the sun. "My friends," he gasped. Without a second thought, he launched into the air, flying straight toward the heart of the smoke. The heat was unbearable. The air shimmered, warping his vision. Below, he heard the terrified cries of the animals. He spotted a family of deer, a warren of rabbits, and dozens of other small creatures trapped in a cul-de-sac of rocks. The fire was closing in on them from 3 sides, a towering wave of orange death. Behind them was a sheer cliff face. There was nowhere to go.
Ignis and the elders were circling above, their faces twisted in horror and regret. "It's over," Ignis whispered, his voice trembling. "We can't get close enough without burning them ourselves." But then, a streak of green flashed past them. Draco. He was diving straight into the oven. "Draco, stop. You'll be cooked alive," Ignis's father screamed. Draco didn't listen. He landed with a heavy thud between the trembling animals and the advancing wall of fire. The heat seared his scales. The smoke stung his eyes, blinding him with tears. A baby rabbit looked up at him, its eyes wide with absolute terror, shaking uncontrollably. "Trust me," Draco said, though his own voice shook. He closed his eyes. He didn't summon anger this time. He didn't try to be a fire dragon. He summoned love. He summoned the fierce desire to protect the innocent. He inhaled, filling his lungs, not with heat, but with breath. He opened his mouth and blew, not fire, but a bubble. Yet, this was no ordinary bubble. It was a masterpiece of surface tension, thick, viscous, and massive. He directed it over the family of deer. The bubble shimmered and descended, encapsulating them completely in a protective, airtight dome. He blew another for the rabbits, and another for the birds. Bubble after bubble left his lips, each one landing and sealing the animals inside a cool, humid environment. When the wall of fire finally crashed over them, the dragons above turned away, expecting to see the animals vaporized. But the flames slipped. The fire licked at the giant bubbles, but the soapy liquid film was incredibly resilient. The moisture inside the bubbles fought back the heat. The bubbles acted as temporary wet shields, reflecting the flames like diamonds in a furnace. Inside, the animals were terrified but unharmed. The air around them kept cool by the evaporation of the soap. Draco didn't stop. He stood his ground, his skin blistering, blowing a massive barrier of foam and bubbles to push back the flames, creating a wet firebreak. Every bubble that popped from the extreme heat released a splash of water, dousing the ground and hissing defiance at the fire. He was a living extinguisher. It took hours for the fire to burn itself out, aided finally by the arrival of heavy rain clouds that seemed to answer the forest's plea. When the smoke cleared, the devastation was heartbreaking. Great swathes of the forest were black and charred, but scattered throughout the gray ash were pristine circles of life. The bubbles had eventually popped, leaving the animals slightly damp, bewildered but completely alive. Draco collapsed on the soot-covered ground, exhausted, his green scales darkened by smoke, his throat raw. One by one, the dragons from the mountain descended. The sound of their heavy landings shook the earth, but this time there was no laughter, no mocking. Silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by the chirping of the birds emerging from safety. Ignis walked forward. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a deep, hanging shame. He looked at the charred trees, then at the living animals, and finally at Draco. "Draco," Ignis stammered, "my fire, it destroyed everything but your bubbles. They saved what mattered." The clan elder, the same one Draco had soaked weeks ago, stepped forward. He lowered his massive, horned head until it touched the ground in front of Draco, the ultimate sign of respect in dragon culture. "We were wrong, Draco," the elder rumbled, his voice thick with emotion. "We thought being a dragon meant having the power to burn. Today you showed us that true power is the ability to protect." From that day forward, the culture of Mount Cinder changed. Draco was no longer the outcast. He was the guardian of the forest. He wasn't just accepted, he was revered. The other dragons began to visit the forest, not to intimidate, but to help replant the trees, using their strength to dig and move earth. While Draco stood watch, always ready to bring joy and safety with his breath, Draco realized that his curse was actually his greatest gift. In a world full of fire and destruction, he was the coolant, the protector, the shield. Whenever he watched his bubbles float into the sky, reflecting the healed forest in their oily sheen, he didn't see weakness anymore. He saw resilience, he saw hope. And that, my friends, is the story of the dragon who breathed bubbles, a reminder that you don't need to fit the mold to be a hero. Sometimes, the very thing that makes you different is the exact thing the world needs to survive.